Hello and welcome to a Remembrance Sunday special. In today's video, we're looking at the sterling work of the Commonwealth War Graves Commission and, of course, the Festival of Remembrance. Now, I had the privilege of catching up with Ian Howell from the Commonwealth War Graves Commission to talk about some of the sterling work they do, but also about a really interesting project which you listeners might be able to help us with.
I'm Ian Howell, and I'm a volunteer with the Commonwealth War Graves Commission. I got into volunteering with the Commission after I retired with the Army Cadet Force.
Right.
And just before COVID, the first lot of COVID, I saw a advert online that the Commonwealth War Graves Commission were looking for volunteers for a new project that they were setting up, which is called Eyes On, Hands On.
Oh, right, okay.
So that pretty much means they were looking for volunteers. As you can imagine, they've got sort of like 130,000 sites or something across the world.
Right.
And they look after a couple of million graves, headstones, memorials, cemeteries. And they have a limited number of people who work full-time for the organisation. So they were looking for volunteers to do the eyes on for them, who would be local to that area. So that involves checking the headstone for any deterioration, possibly any damage, any vandalism, anything then that they find, they can report. And if they're just, and partly hands-on then, is that we were also trained to actually clean the headstones.
So what was it that drew you to this advert, made you think this was something you might want to do?
Pretty much my starting point was a guy called George Henry Wright. He was born in Warwick, but he lived in High Street in Penarth. And I had a memorial to him, a family memorial in a frame. I had a couple of them actually, and this one, when I lived with my family, with my parents, they were on my bedroom wall. When I moved in with my wife, they went into the loft, and I didn't think that was the best place for them. So the one with George Henry Wright was in the 1st Battalion, the Gloucesters. I donated that to the Gloucesters Regiment, the Regimental Museum in Gloucester. And it was only after I donated it that I did the research and found out more about him. And at the outbreak of the First World War, he was living in the old monastery bakery in Llancarvan.
Oh, wow.
And which I didn't even know there was a monastery in Llancarvan, and I didn't know they had a bakery. But I did visit the site, and I actually knocked on the door, the person who lived in the house, and they were very helpful to me. And George wasn't a young man when he went off to war in 1914. In fact, he was 34, which I always suspected that he'd been in the army previously, and he'd fought during the Boer War in South Africa. And at the outbreak of war, he was recalled to the regiment, and he was actually working for Great Western Railway before he was called up. But by 1914, the Gloucesters, the 1st Battalion, were involved in bitter fighting on the Western Front at a place called Zellebeck. And during that fighting, bearing in mind George he didn't go with the 1st Battalion, he was called up as reserve, didn't get there till October. By November, he's badly wounded and gets evacuated to the coast to Calais to a hospital. And unfortunately, again, another unfortunate case, and he dies of his wounds. There's a lot of history from Penarth, Barry. It was that part of the research that then got me interested in volunteering for the commission, doing the talks, doing the tours.
So you mentioned Merthyr Dyfan. Where exactly are the Commonwealth War Graves in sort of Vale Glamorgan?
In Vale Glamorgan, they're in 34 different sites.
Right. Okay.
Barry is by far the biggest, with 104, closely followed by Llantwit Major, and then Penarth, and then the rest. There's like 70 odd graves then spread amongst the other 31.
When it comes to, something that's looked after by the Commonwealth War Graves Commission, is it just the two world wars, or is it lots of different conflicts?
Before the First World War, then the soldiers' lot who died in battle wasn't great, and there wasn't that much stead put by the British government or the British Army for looking after, marking, recording where all these graves were. And it was a gentleman by the name of Fabian Ware who had the insight. At the outbreak of World War One, he was a man of 45, too old to join up for the army, and he was part of a Red Cross team on the Western Front, and he took it upon himself to do a lot of recording and of where people were being buried. And he contacted higher authorities, see if he could make it that his unit was responsible for the war dead. And from that, from his foresight, the Imperial War Graves Commission was formed in 1917. So in answer to your question, the First World War, and not that long after they finished building the memorials and burying the dead from the First World War, then the Second World War broke out. So it's the First World War and Second World War. Any conflicts before or after, especially after, are not directly looked after by the Commonwealth War Graves Commission. They're looked after by the Ministry of Defence.
Now, it goes beyond simply tending the graves themselves. There was a piece of work you talked to me about earlier, which sounds really exciting and is something that our listeners might benefit from and might be able to help with. And that is the database that is being put together. Can you tell me a bit more about that, please?
Hopefully every service person who died in both world wars is on the resource, is on the portal.
Oh, right.
And as part of the War Graves Commission's, one of the projects when we first started is every war grave in the country is being photographed. So there are lots of people who, although their loved ones might be buried at Merthyr Dyfan, their families may not live local anymore or never live local. So there are some, there are a couple of people from around the world buried at Merthyr Dyfan. There's a pilot from the Czech Republic, and the chances of his family ever coming there are probably quite small. However, they would possibly like to see the grave. So every gravestone at all the cemeteries is part of this project. And at the moment, other volunteers are busy uploading every photograph to correspond with the information that they already have about them.
Fantastic work that is. And how far through that project is the commission at the moment, you know?
Every gravestone for the 6 cemeteries that I'm involved with have all been photographed and uploaded onto the to the portal. It's then a case of how quickly, but you can imagine there are millions of war dead around the world.
Yes,
it's not just in this country. They are attempting to photograph everyone. When you think, say, at Tynecott alone, there are 12,000 headstones.
Wow.
Which is a lot of work. It is a lot of work. And they haven't got a huge, massive number of people working for the War Graves Commission.
So, in a nutshell, then, if somebody's relative fell in the First or Second World War, but they don't know where that person is interred, it can be found on your portal, and we're getting to a point, hopefully, where once they find it, they'll actually be able to see the grave as well. Is that right?
That is correct, yes.
That's a remarkable piece of work.
It will not be tomorrow. It
No,
will
no.
possibly not be by this time next year. However, and there are new internments all the time across Europe as large projects and building projects. There's a really big building project going on at the moment in northern France where they're extending a canal. They're spending something like 3 billion euros on it, but it's going cutting right through the corner of one of the biggest battlefields of the First World War, and they're expecting to find possibly up to 1,000 new interments to go in there. And then some of the cemeteries and memorials across France and Belgium are iconic. So if we say the Menin Gate and Thiapol, and they've just, by UNESCO, been granted 51 sites run by the Commission are now World Heritage sites.
Wow.
In their own rights.
Yeah.
Which, when they were in the early 1920s, when they were building these sites, it was described as the biggest civil engineering project since the building of the pyramids.
Wow. Yeah, I suppose it makes
because of the number of headstones and the number of commemorations. So, as we said, at Tyncott, there are 12,500 graves, but there's sort of like 70,000 names on walls of people they don't know where they are. They've just started a new project. Again, it's on the Commonwealth War Graves website, and they're trying to record stories to go with the names. So they have all these names on the website, and now they're trying to record stories about the people, and where possible, add in photographs for the people. So when I do the tours, I always tell people that a photograph of the casualty brings something to it. It adds, it brings them to life.
Okay. So is this something you're actively looking to encourage? Are you looking for relatives to come forward with pictures and stories of people that they know passed in the wars?
If anyone is buried in any of the cemeteries that I'm involved with, especially Merthyr Dyfan and Penarth, if they were to have a photograph of any of the casualties who were buried there, and it makes it all worthwhile. It really does.
Absolutely. So thank you to Ian Howell for coming in, for talking to us today, and thank you especially to the Commonwealth War Graves Commission for the fantastic work that they do.